Optimizing Logistics in Vietnam. Before we start, can I do a quick sound check? Can everyone hear me okay? I just want to check and see if sound is okay. Please let me know. Before we start, I'm just doing a quick sound check. Can everyone hear? Okay, great. So if everyone can hear, then we will proceed. My name is Van Lee, and I am the moderator for today's webinar, the sixth of the Investing in Vietnam webinar series brought to you by KPMG Vietnam. KPMG Vietnam has been in Vietnam since 1994 and is one of the largest professional services firms in the country, with offices in Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, and Da Nang. Today, we are proud to have with us two speakers, Mr. Phuc Nguyen, Director of Strategy and Operations in Consulting, and Mr. Rohit Nha, Senior Manager in Tax and Legal. Welcome, Phuc and Rohit, to our webinar.
Hello.
Before we begin, I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping issues. We have an informative webinar for you full of key topics which include an overview of the logistics market in Vietnam and guidance from our speakers on how best to optimize logistics in the country. After the main presentation from Phuc and Rohit, we will have set aside the last 30 minutes of today's webinar for a question and answer session. If you have a question for one of our speakers, please submit your questions by typing into the chat window at the bottom left corner of the screen and then hit send. I will collect the questions from the chat window as we go and share with our speakers after the presentation. Without further delay, I will hand the floor over to Phuc and Rohit to introduce themselves and start their presentation. Thank you guys for joining us.
Okay, thank you, Van, for having me here, and thank you, everyone, all participants to join this webinar. I'm very happy that when I see the list of participants that there are a few from the logistics industry, but most of you are from other businesses and other functions. So I'm very happy to hear that. Just a quick introduction about myself. My name is Phuc. I'm leading the customer operations practice of KPMG Management Consulting. So customer is actually the front end of the business, where we help our clients in the customer experience space, the sales and marketing, and the operations is the back end of the business, where we focus on supply chain from plan, source, make, and deliver. So today we are going to talk about the deliver part, which is the logistics and how to optimize it. About myself, I have 14 years experience in consulting in both Netherlands and Vietnam. And I'm here in Vietnam actually today exactly 9 years.
Wow.
So today is a milestone for me. I have also 3 years working experience in the third-party logistics industry. So I hope to share a few insights in the Vietnam market about logistics. Rohit?
Thank you, Phuc. And good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. To give a brief background, I'm Rohit, looking after the trade and customs operations in KPMG. And I have work experience in Hong Kong and now working in Vietnam. As Phuc said, logistics industry is a growing business operation in Vietnam. And from our perspective, we help our clients in international trade, which is directly linked with the sourcing, shipping, and delivery of the goods throughout their global operations. So we hope you find this webinar useful, and we would be happy to discuss your questions.
Okay, so I take over from here. The table of content today. So I've designed this webinar for our audience. So like I said, I'm happy that the audience is quite wide. I see from the participants list that a few people are from outside of Vietnam, but most are here. So actually, the topics that I'm going to share, for some of you it might be new, but for some of you it might be common knowledge. So apologies for the people who don't hear something new today. So we're going to discuss more first about the logistics market overview and the key trends in logistics. What are the challenges in Vietnam? So 10 minutes about the first part, 10 minutes about the challenges, and about 10 minutes about optimization opportunities in Vietnam. And then, like Van said, there will be around half an hour about questions. The questions and answer you can already write down in the chat box. So we can collect it, and then at the end of the presentation, I will try to address all of your questions. If I can't address those questions, I will get back to you after I talk to a few other specialists in the logistics which I have in my team. So don't worry about that. Going into the global logistics outlook. If you look at the global outlook, the logistics is always they always have a direct correlation with the trade and with the global economy. So if you look at the trade flow in the global, you see that more than 90% of the world trade is carried by sea. And if you look at the volumes that are estimated for this trade flow by sea, it's about 10 billion tons per 10 billion tons in total in 2015. And as you can see, the estimated growth for next year is around within the range of 2.1 to 4%. So from a logistics point of view, this is a good indicator that it will grow further. Be aware that this number that you see here, this volume, is only about the trade flows between countries. So this is excluding the trade flows within the countries. So for example, if you look at the sea from South Vietnam to North Vietnam, for example, this is not incorporated in this 10 billion. Like other industries, logistics will also change dramatically in the future due to a lot of innovations and disruptive technologies. So I would like to show a quick video for you to have a view of what is going on in the future in logistics.
The transport and logistics industry is always on the move, and now it's in the process of forging a new path: connectivity. But how are businesses dealing with this, and where is this path leading to? Our experts have been looking at these questions for many years now. They know that the logistics of A to B are fully changing. Considerably more people and goods will have to be transported in the future. Bigger airports and mega freighters are the logical consequence. However, additional capacity alone will not be enough to cover the rising demand. For companies, the answer lies in better utilization. The various means of transport must be linked and synchronized with one another to be better connected. Only in this way is it possible for a passenger to leave an airplane and, directly using live data, select the most suitable mode of transport for getting into the city. Analyzing passenger numbers and travel patterns in public transport enables us to reliably predict rush hour traffic. Additional parameters such as weather data help us to identify potential disruptions early on. The same is true for transporting goods. Using the right data allows us to predict bottlenecks and plan capacities. And this is only the beginning. Vehicles and goods that communicate with each other. Drones that deliver packages to hard-to-reach locations. Or spare parts that don't even need to be shipped because they can be produced on site with a 3D printer. In other words, the transport and logistics industry will undergo a fundamental change. The industry has numerous opportunities, challenges, and questions. And the biggest one of all, how can you deal with them? Let us shape the future together, reliably, affordably, and with quality and efficiency. KPMG.
Okay, so as you see from this video, as trade will grow, logistics will grow with it. And as a message in this video, increasing capacity alone will not be enough. So the key to improvement is how to improve utilization. And I will come back to utilization a little bit later in this presentation. If we move to the next slide, it shows a logistics trends radar. So if you look at this radar, you can see quite a lot of trends. So just to quickly explain the graph first. So on the left side, you see the social and business trends. On the right side, you see purely technology trends in logistics. And if you look at from the vertical axis, those are the technologies that are you know, like potentially highly disruptive. And on the bottom side of the graph, from the middle to the bottom, you see that those are the technologies that have a lower impact. And the circle is actually the time scale. So the trends that are orange, those that you can expect under 5 years, and the white dots are the trends that you can expect within 5 years or more. Those will be the trends that will enter the market and will become the status quo. So a lot of these trends are quite, you can say, quite example, self-driving is something that you cannot think of here yet. Maybe in the next 20 to 40 or 30 years. 3D printing is also a new technology that it sounds very science fiction, but it will come. This is actually the logistics trends globally, but actually if you look at the Vietnam market, you will see a few of these trends already shaping and are real. So if you take, for example, robotics and automation, a lot of companies and the government are already talking about Industry 4.0. We see a lot of companies, or a few companies in Vietnam, like the big ones like Vinamilk, they already invested a few years ago in automated factory and warehouse in Binh Duong, where, for example, if you go into the warehouse, you don't see any people, everything is robotic. If you take the trend, for example, on-demand delivery, you see recently that Uber and they launched the service on-demand delivery. So instead of transporting people, they're also transporting any shipment or parcels or whatever. So you can do it on demand right away within a few minutes, a few clicks of your phone. In a few minutes, somebody will pick up your package to ship from A to B. And those same companies, Uber and Grab, they use big data to analyze customer base, offer customized promotion programs, adjust prices based on demand and supply or weather conditions. So big data is also things that is going on in Vietnam already. So be aware that these trends can also affect your industry as well. Now, if we look at the Vietnam economy and the logistics that is backing on it. So if you look at Vietnam economy, it's growing with 6.3% this year and forecasted this year. If you look at the number of people, we have more than 92 million people. And actually the key sectors that drive the growth are manufacturing, retail, and agriculture. So if you look at from a macroeconomic point from Vietnam, the retail is the driver for domestic consumption. And if domestic consumption, manufacturing, agriculture is growing, the logistics industry will grow with these industries, in the growth of these industries. Another driver for logistics in Vietnam is the export. So Vietnam export is growing and continue to grow with the new free trade agreements. If you look at the merchandise growth in the region, Vietnam is actually the top performer if you compare it to other countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, even Singapore. Vietnam is the only one that is growing in 2016 in trade. And also another big driver for logistics is the signed or developing FTAs that is ongoing. So you know that the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the new Trump administration is stopped. But there are other free trade agreements that will help developing the trade between Vietnam and other countries, and therefore also help the logistics to grow. So if you look at the numbers, the export and import numbers, which are growth drivers for logistics, see that the last half of this year, most of the sectors, you can see double-digit growth. So from this point of view, this it is a very strong indicator that the logistics will grow as well. And from a foreign direct investment perspective, you can also see that a lot of companies are eyeing for Vietnam. We from KPMG, we also see that companies are approaching us to help them with market entry, looking for foreign direct investment, looking for companies to acquire. You can see that in the last few years, there's growth in this FDI, and for this year, you can already see that this period compared to last year period is already more than 50% increase in growth. So this is also another indicator for the logistics sector to growth to grow together with the FDI. If you look at the logistics sector in Vietnam, at the numbers, the volume numbers, you can also see that the last since 14 to 17, there's a 11.5% growth year on year. But looking forward to the next 5 years, there will still be a growth, not double digit, but 7.8% growth is still very impressive. So if you look at the logistics sector in general, we can also see there's a lot of M&A activity going on. So this slide just shows just a few of the examples. So Mako Capital, a private equity fund, invested in made 2 investments in logistics companies. So ABA Cool Transport is one. Logistics is another one. But also from the shipper perspective, like the big companies like Samsung or Tuan Industry, they also see that there's a big potential in this logistics sector. One is because the logistics sector is growing with double digits. So it will be a good investment to invest in this kind of business. But also those companies also invest in this logistics sector to secure their business because they have a growing business in Vietnam, which means that they need more. They need to secure the logistics more because there will still be challenges in logistics. So if you can control the logistics company, you can also secure that the output that goes out to your customers are more secure. So up until now, you see there's a lot of positive messages for the logistics in general, but it doesn't mean that we don't have any challenges. So if you look in Vietnam, there are quite a lot of challenges in logistics. So the ones that I'm going to name is just a few that we see that has a direct impact into the logistics business in general. It's not a complete and exhaustive a list of challenges. So if you have more challenges, please share with us, share through the chat as well, and we can have a discussion about it. So let me go briefly one by one. So the first one, I get back to the utilization, which is from the video, and looking into the future. Utilization is if you look at utilization in Vietnam, some companies they think they do very well in utilization because they make sure that every space within the truck is fully loaded. But that actually leads to overloading and leads to other implications in logistics. But that is not the only utilization I'm talking about. So, okay, so from A to B, you can utilize the truck full, but if you look at the Vietnam market, the truck goes from A to B back to A normally. But if you look at the B to A trip, a lot of trips are empty. So if you look at long haul, for example, from the south to the north, 1 in 3 trucks come back empty. And if you look at short trips, 70% is empty. So short trips meaning, for example, from Binh Duong to Ho Chi Minh City, for example, short trip, companies cannot fill the trucks that is on a return trip. So this has a big impact on the utilization of the truck. But the utilization is not only about the space utilization, but also the time utilization of the truck. So if you look at, for example, the airline industry, how they utilize the airplane, the aircrafts, means that the aircraft has to always fly. That's how you utilize the asset that you have. And if you look at the truck, it's also the same. It's also an asset that you use. But we've done a study before, and in one of the study where we did a motion study for 1 week, it showed that the trucks for that particular client of us, that the truck are only 10% of the time on the road. So the other 90% of the whole day, it's standing still, it's idle, or it's doing nothing. So that is also how you can increase the utilization of the truck. So the cost of the truck, you can spread it over over more trips, for example. So in this space, the utilization, Vietnam is doing quite bad in utilization. So the next big challenge in Vietnam, and I've also already seen some questions about this yesterday, is about fraud and corruption in logistics. So fraud and corruption is not only on the road. For example, there are a lot of police on the road that stop the truck and then ask for facilitation money. This is also related to, for example, the customs. So in Vietnam, if goods has to flow through customs, normally you have to spend some facilitation money or T money, how they call it, to the custom officials. And according to a World Bank study, it estimated that the facilitation money adds 15% to the cost of an imported 40-foot container and 13% of the exported container. So actually, all these costs that adds up in the logistics will be eventually paid by the customer. And if this continues to go on, this will impact the competitiveness of Vietnam, actually. So fraud and corruption, the second challenge. The third challenge is about planning and inefficient planning and inefficient operations. What we see in Vietnam is a lot of companies are still doing everything manual. So for planning, they do it manually. They don't have IT systems, or they don't have dedicated planning software. Everything is in Excel. And on the operational side as well, operations, if you look at, for example, the loading and unloading activity, everything is loaded by manpower instead of using pallets or using material handling equipment. So that is also leading to inefficiency in the time how you use trucks, for example. It has an impact. The fourth challenge is about infrastructure. So if you've been living here in Vietnam, you can see, and you've been traveling around, the network of roadways are quite poor. If you take a trip from here to, let's say, Nha Trang, it takes you maybe 8-10 hours. Well, actually, it's only a few hundred kilometers, and in every other country, it should be only a 3 or 4 hour trip. So this also leads to a lot of inefficiencies in the whole logistics. Also, there's a lot of congestion in the road infrastructure. So in the big cities, you can see if you go from here to another district, and it takes you one hour, for example. That leads to a lot of inefficiencies and high costs that eventually will be paid by the customer. In terms of equipment, there's a lot of challenges in the equipment that we use. We use quite old equipment. So if you look at the trucks or the assets in Vietnam that we use, most of them are already written off by mature markets and dumped into this market. So if you look at the vehicles on the roads, you can see they are very highly polluted. They're old. So the average truck age in, for example, North America is only 7 years. And in Vietnam, it's 17 years. So we use very old trucks that are already written off by other mature markets. It has an effect on fuel efficiencies because the old trucks, they're not fuel efficient. They have a lot of maintenance costs. There are a lot of breakdowns. And all these are hidden costs that we don't think of. And eventually it will be paid by the end consumer. Another thing is the appetite for investment is very low because the market is very competitive. And then competitive, I mean, mostly the transportation industry is very price focused. So it's all about price. and not too much on service. So if you look at the third-party logistics provider from overseas, they come to Vietnam. They cannot invest in new equipment, because if they invest in new equipment, they're not competitive anymore. So that's why you see that leads to the next challenge. The transportation industry is quite fragmented. There are a lot of companies in Vietnam, more than 1,000 in the transportation industry. Large 3PLs, they use subcontractors, don't have their own fleet. They use these small family businesses to comprise the whole fleet. And most of these trucking companies, they subcontract to these companies. They're behaving very opportunistic. So to give you a quick example, like a few years ago, when the government they enforced more stricter rules and regulations on the road about overloading, you saw that there were price increases of 300-400%. Because the subcontractors, they act very opportunistic. Every price increase that they can think of, they will charge directly to the client. So there's no much regulation in the transportation industry, and because there's so many different small companies that are competing against each other. Another difficulty with the fragmented transportation industry is because it's not organized. It's very difficult to organize backhaul. And backhaul means that the return trip, for example, from A to B, the return trip is the backhaul. It's very difficult because there's no organization, or there's no company or companies that have a visibility of the backhaul. Another challenge is the access to inner cities. In Vietnam, most of the business happens in either Saigon, Hanoi, Da Nang, Cần Thơ, but there's also a strict truck ban to the city during the day. So the goods cannot flow with big container trucks into the city. At the border of the city, you have to load into smaller vehicles, because only the small vehicles can enter. So this is also a big impact on the cost of logistics. And the last point that I want to make is related to technology. I mentioned a little bit in the inefficient operations. So there's quite low adoption of technology. So in the technology space in logistics, there are quite different technologies that are used to increase your effectiveness, but most of the companies, everything is still manual. So this also has a big implication on logistics in Vietnam. So if you look at logistics, all these challenges and issues leads to higher logistics costs in general. So GDP of Vietnam is quite high, it's 5%, and this accounts all the logistics costs, but also for example, the fraud and corruption is included in this percentage. And if you compare, Vietnam is quite high. The world average is only 13.8%. If you look at Germany, it's only 6%. The Netherlands is quite low. US is 9%. The European Union in general is 12%. China is quite high, 21%. But if you look at Vietnam, it's even higher. So all of these, it's a big challenge to Vietnam in general. But it doesn't mean that there are no opportunities. So this section, I want to discuss briefly about the opportunities. So we look at opportunities mostly from three levels. So strategic level, tactical level, and operational level. So at the strategic level, it's more aimed at long-term strategic improvement. And big investment is required and decision required from the top. Tactical level is more aimed at medium-term improvement, medium investment required, but still decision from the top. And operation is more aimed at short-term quick wins with low investment required and can be solved at the operational level. So if you look at what the opportunities are in each of these levels, I will go briefly point by point very quickly, but for a few points I will have a deep dive. So it requires a little more elaboration on that one. So first, from the strategic level, I would say invest in technology. Vietnam is still very new. People still don't have appetite to invest, large. But that's a lot of times I think it's related to the short-term thinking of a lot of businesses. They don't think very long. They don't think strategic. Everything is more, okay, what can I get now if I put this money? What can I get for my buck? So investing in technology is a strategic opportunity. Another opportunity is a dedicated fleet or outsourcing. So some companies they outsource, but they think, okay, they're not so happy with the transportation that they outsource to a 3PL. They want to take it back and have a dedicated fleet. But other companies, they have dedicated fleet, but they are thinking of outsourcing. So these are strategic decisions that you need to think of, like what is the best for your company. The third one I will go, the fourth one is network configuration. I will deep dive into this a bit later. And together with the network configuration is the footprint. So in logistics cost, there's also tax involved. So I will discuss this a bit later. On the tactical level, looking at the sales and operations planning. So doing planning at the tactical level where you do where you plan for a few months ahead. If you do that well, you can also plan your logistics better. The carrier utilization relates to how you utilize your carrier. So that comes back to the utilization. This means that, okay, if you have a lot of goods to transport, what is the mix of carriers? Do you have a 10-ton truck? You have how many 5-ton trucks you have? How many 1-ton trucks you have? So the mix of carriers is also a way how you can optimize it. The mode mix is looking at the different ways how you transport and how can you, what is the best mix of transportation mode. So will you do a part by sea, by river? Will you do a part by road? Or will you do part by, for example, in Vietnam, by motorbike? So the mode mix is also a way how you can optimize. The packing mix relates to how you package your products, and normally if you have the mix better, you can also optimize in logistics. And the stability in sales, the last one is related to how you organize your sales, how you organize your sales practice, because whatever the sales is doing, eventually it will have an impact on logistics because the sales is selling, but the goods have to follow. So if you look at the fast-moving consumer goods industry, you see what is very common in the sales is there's always a peak at the period. So at a peak at the month, you see high sales. At peak of the quarter, you see high sales. But this has an implication on the logistics as well, because you can see in the beginning of the month a lot of logistics vehicles or logistics is idle, isn't doing nothing. But at the end of the month, companies have to pay extra or pay a bigger amount to logistics to secure that the goods that you sold at the end of the month is also delivered. So if you can stabilize your sales and have more a stable demand during the whole month or during the whole period, it can optimize logistics as well. On the operational side, you're looking more at what can you do operationally. So for example, looking at truck turnaround time, instead of 2 trips a day, make 3 trips a day. So you're reducing the logistics cost. On the cross-docking side, I will deep dive a bit later in a few slides. Optimizing warehouse operations is looking at, okay, how you handle your warehouse operations. For example, I discussed already the loading and unloading currently in Vietnam. A lot of companies load manually. So box by box, you put it into the truck to optimize the whole space. But the way how we do it now is very inefficient because it takes 2 hours to load a big container truck. While if you optimize it, you find ways how you can do it quicker by using, for example, palletized transport. You can do an loading and unloading in 15 minutes. So that leads to also palletized transport, using pallets to transport the volumes in the country. Internal material handling, so using pallets, using forklift trucks, using pallet wagons. So those kind of things are still very manual. We don't use a lot of those kind of material handling equipment in Vietnam. Increasing backhaul. So like I said, moving goods from A to B, but also can you find transport to move from B to A? So this is also a way how you can you can increase your efficiency in logistics. Indirect tax optimization is another area of deep dive we want to do. And then the last one is night deliveries. A lot of companies they deliver only during the day, but night deliveries is in our opinion is a way how you can avoid, for example, the city ban for large container trucks. But it requires a little more, for example, coordination with your clients, for example, to receive the goods at night. So these are a few areas that we can think of to optimize your logistics. Now I would like to deep dive a bit on a few of these topics. So investment in technology, network configuration, cross-docking, and indirect tax optimization. So if you look at Vietnam in general and the business here, you can see that a lot of companies, they don't even have enterprise resource planning software to manage the business. So actually, if you do business, it's all about visibility, having visibility into your supply chain. And throughout the whole logistics value chain, there are areas you can use technology to gain this effectiveness and efficiency. So for example, in warehouse, you can use warehouse management systems. So warehouse management system supports day-to-day warehouse operations. If you look at transportation, pure transportation, you have transportation management systems to help you moving freight from origin to destination efficiently, reliably, and also cost efficiency. And also from the inventory point of view, throughout the whole supply chain, there are inventory, but how do you plan for it? How do you make sure how much inventory to keep and where to stock it? So all these technologies that you can use to be more efficient within your supply chain and logistics. Currently in Vietnam, even the big multinational players, some don't even have warehouse management systems, don't use management systems. So these are you know, if you look at mature markets, these are like standard technology, but in Vietnam, these are the areas that we can still increase our efficiency if you're willing to invest and think strategically. About network configuration. So if you look at the logistics network, the network configuration is actually the physical configuration of your supply chain. So it's about where do you put your distribution centers? Where do you put your factories? Where you have your distributors, your retailers? So the physical configuration is the network, and the way how you have designed your network has a big impact on your logistics cost. So for example, if you have a factory that is very far away from where your demand is, where you sell your products, you will increase your logistics cost because you have to transport. So there's always a trade-off where you place your assets, and also how does it impact the transportation cost. So if you look at your network configuration and you redesign it, there's a very big opportunity for you to look at the total logistics cost and how you can reduce it. So when you do this kind of exercise, you try to find answers on questions such as with current and future demand, how many distribution centers do you, or what is the right number of distribution or distributors nationwide? How much inventory should I stock at each location? Should I open a new factory? Where should I open it and when, for example? And how much cost can you reduce by redesigning this network? So this is a big exercise that needs you know, really insightful, quantifiable data. And to do this, normally you cannot do this just by simply having a calculation on Excel. It's because there's so many parameters involved, so many complex things that you need to include into this model. Normally, when you do this, you need to have a simulation software. And I would like to show you a quick video on a simulation software that KPMG is using to do this kind of work.
With volatile fuel costs and driver shortages, transportation costs are a significant portion of total supply chain spend. With the complexity and volume of data in your transportation network, how can you be sure you're not spending more than you need to? How do you make your transportation network as efficient as possible while still maintaining service levels? LlamaSoft's Supply Chain Guru is the only supply chain design solution with integrated transportation optimization. That means that you can design your optimal manufacturing and distribution network and design the best transportation network to get your products where they need to go. Using Supply Chain Guru, you can create a digital model of your transportation network. Use the model to baseline existing routing strategies and test how changes to your network would affect costs and service levels by incorporating key variables such as cost, time, capacity, and delivery parameters. Transportation optimization allows you to design transportation routes that minimize costs of multi-stop routes and determine mode selection to evaluate LTL and truckload trade-offs. This creates the optimal strategic plan to set inventory levels, schedule production, and define distribution routing. Using transportation optimization, you can achieve significant and tangible business benefits by identifying efficient operation strategies to lower costs and improve service times. Supply Chain Guru gives you ready access to an up-to-date model of your supply chain. This modeling framework enables you to include alternate sources, routes, transportation modes, or production processes that may be required to meet your desired service levels. Stop wondering if your transportation network is as effective as it could be. Click here to learn more about Supply Chain Guru Transportation Optimization.
Okay, so that is an example of a simulation software to simulate your network. So if you look at if you do this kind of study and you look at the methodology for doing this, there are always four phases that you need to go through. So the first phase, like I said before, for defining the optimal network, you need to have a lot of data. You need to have existing data. So you can do logistics mapping, you can do the flow path mapping. You also identify like where your demand is coming from. So you need to work with sales, for example, to get the sales number for the next 5 years, because you always need to think ahead in the future how you want to design your network, and that one is based on where your demand will be. Service level for flow paths, and then you have to calculate the logistics costs. So the first phase is always selection, which also have challenges. So do you have data, or is your data clean? So validate your assumptions. So that is the first phase. The second phase is you have to build the baseline. So you have to build a model that reflects the reality of your current network. So based on that one, you build a model that you can say, okay, I can use this model because it accurately reflects the reality. Once you have that one, you go into the phase of simulation. So you build in new hypothesis for your new network, and you define different scenarios, and all those different scenarios have to build into the model and run the model and see what will come out of that model in terms of, for example, cost, inventory you need to hold, the customer service that you're going to deliver. So all these, there are a lot of parameters involved in the simulation model. And by finding scenarios and running these scenarios in the model, you can find the most optimal future state. And actually, you can build your network how a lot of companies in Vietnam do it, by just adding nodes and adding things, but then eventually in the future, looking back, you see that it's not efficient. So actually, by doing a future forward-looking simulation modeling, it will help you in decision making. For example, where to put in your warehouse, where to put your new factory, those kind of things. What kind of mode of transport will you use? What is the lead time in this kind of route? What is the whole logistics network is very complex with a lot of parameters. So what we're saying is using a simulation software to make the right decisions very important. The second topic I want to quickly deep dive into is cross-docking. So cross-docking is something that we already use in Vietnam, but not by all companies and not very extensively, like if you look at other mature markets. So cross-docking is the concept of is a practice in logistics that you unload a product into a warehouse space, and you load it into another vehicle without storing it. So everything happens within a 6-hour time frame. So on the left, you can see, for example, 4 suppliers, and it delivers directly to the customers. So you can see with the number of arrows means that the number of transportation from A to B transportation involved. If you use cross-docking, you can reduce the number of transport or trips by simply sorting the products in the cross-dock that goes to the right destination. So on the right side, you have, for example, a distribution center that has a cross-dock function. You have different suppliers, but your customer don't need the full container truckload, for example. So you use the dock to receive, sort, and ship, and that is the activity that can be done very quickly. And it's also not very costly because the only thing you need is just a space where you can do the sorting. So if you look at from a Vietnam perspective, you see a lot of companies, they ship products from the north to the south, or from the south to the north, because they have the factory facility in the north or the south, but the demand is nationwide. So then you need to transport the goods from north to south and south to north. So this example on the left side, you can see there will be trips that goes from south to north, but there are drop-off points somewhere in the middle. So what you see is that the truck goes from south to north, but then around the middle, around Da Nang or Hue, you see that the truck is only half empty. And you can see you need 2 trips for two separate shipments. If you use the concept of cross-docking somewhere in the middle of the country, you can still have the 2 trucks going from the south to the north, but in the middle of the country, you consolidate the shipments of the 2 trucks into one truck. So you save 1 trip from the middle of the country to the north. So this is the concept cross-docking, to explain very briefly. And then this is one way how you can be more efficient and save on logistics cost. So for the indirect tax optimization, I leave it to Rohit, our tax and customs expert.
Thank you, Phuc. It was quite informative. So adding on to what we have been discussing over this webinar, the importance of logistics in the international trade and the global business. Indirect tax has a direct linkage with the logistics and the supply chain. So more and more companies are now looking at their overall supply chain network from end-to-end procurement and delivery. So companies start looking at their sourcing, their shipping, and the ultimate delivery of the goods to the customers and the delivery networks in the import country and the exporting country. So you would notice, and it's a growing practice in the global trade now, that companies are more and more evaluating their suppliers based on the network and the delivery methods used by the suppliers. So if you have one supplier in Asia with delivery points, one in Vietnam, one in Indonesia, and another one in Thailand, compared to another one which can deliver all the shipments from one port in Vietnam, the buyers would obviously choose the one which can deliver from one port, and it also gives them another incentive to claim the tax relief, because more and more economies, particularly in Asia, they are promoting their global trade and the economy, and the governments and the tax authorities are sponsoring exports through giving tax incentives to the suppliers. So sourcing comes into a direct linkage with the tax relief which is provided by the government. So you have different types of tax reliefs, which is pre-import, during the export, and after export, which can be leveraged by the supplier to supply at a lower cost, and that affects the overall cost of the goods and the logistics cost as well. Moving on to the shipping part, the supply route, most of the free trade agreements, as we touched upon in the beginning of this presentation, the free trade agreements are playing an important role in the growth of global trade, and most of them will have conditions whether or not you can use a direct shipment or an indirect shipment, where you move the goods through a third party country or store it at a customs port in some other country. Some of the countries or the free trade agreements, they are now allowing it, but you have to go through a lot of compliance, and you have to maintain that, you have to make sure that you follow the customs rules and regulations, so that the link of the customs control in your supply chain and your logistics from the source to the end is always under customs control. Which also brings us to the point of using the Incoterm. We see that more and more companies are getting particular about the use of Incoterms, because it directly impacts their risk, delivery, and the cost element. So the risk and ownership in the goods, which affects how they structure their logistics, how they enter into the supply chain agreements with their service providers. Which regional hubs would they use? In Asia, would they use Singapore versus Hong Kong? Now Shanghai is growing as a regional hub, and some of the other countries in Southeast Asia are also growing as a regional hub. So Incoterms are playing an important role. And similarly, for when the goods are imported into the domestic country, then you have to deal with customs. How do you set your benchmarks for your customs broker, who will help you with clearing the goods with customs, declaring value, paying the use of the appropriate tax rates, and then the domestic movement of the goods in the country. So these are some of the important factors which needs to be evaluated in the overall trade industry, and it plays a very important role with logistics.
So it's now time for the fun part, the question and answer session. So of course the presentation was very informative, also very fun. So thanks to Rohit and Phuc for such an informative presentation. We only have about 10, maybe 15 minutes for Q&A, and we have several questions. But if we don't get to your question today, don't worry, we will still address your question by email or another way. So we have a few questions that we want to ask first. Okay, so the first question comes from Coronas. She wants to know, our company imports non-commercial from the parent company for their installation project. And every shipment to Vietnam, the customs officer always asks to increase the price with the reason that the translation of the spare parts at the same with other companies, and they take the high price and apply it to us. Our group confirms that our price is our global price list, not a reduced price. How can we solve this problem? Pete and Phuc, you have a good answer to that.
Yep. That's a very important question, and it's very relevant to the customs practice in Vietnam. Currently, Vietnam Customs, they maintain a database of the price of different goods, which gets updated on a timely basis. And it's their and they benchmark the prices of all imports, whether or not you import it from your related parties or third parties, whether it's commercial or non-commercial, even samples. So Vietnam Customs is very aggressive in terms of valuation of goods because the law is still evolving, and there are numerous changes in the valuation guidelines. Yes, Vietnam is a member of WTO, and they follow the WTO valuation guidelines, but each country has some flexibility on how they want to implement it. So it's part of the growing economy that the customs in Vietnam is quite aggressive at this stage. So it will take some discussion and face time with customs on presenting us with them and making them understand that it's not an undervaluation, but this is a usual almost daily experience which we see for customs valuation here in Vietnam. It will get better in time, but this is a as you maybe you can say that this is a learning curve for the authorities and the evolution of law as well.
Thanks, Rohit. Another question. Which question would you like to do next in the time we have? From Sumitomo Corporation, we have a question. Logistics in Vietnam, they're growing fast. What is your insight to reduce the challenges in Vietnam? I think Phuc will answer that question.
Yeah, so we already gave some ideas to reduce the challenge, but that is mostly from your own business perspective. I think if you look at the logistics challenges in general in Vietnam, the biggest improvement has to come from the government. So how are they willing? What is the willingness for them to invest in infrastructure? How to curb the pollution? How to make the policies easier for companies to do business here? How to reduce the corruption in logistics? So from my point of view, there's only a certain things that companies can do to optimize the logistics. But if the infrastructure is still bad, which has come from the government, then it will still not have a big impact. So the biggest impact should come from governments, actually.
I think we have time for one or two more questions. From Maersk Vietnam, this was submitted to us before the webinar. How should you deal with corrupt practices in the logistics business? Small forwarders are not afraid of encouraging shipping agents to offer lower rates against a quote-unquote financial incentive. And at the same time, shippers' export managers are not afraid to ask for incentives in order to assign the business.
Yeah, so what we see is this is not an only problem for logistics, but it's more a problem for Vietnam in general. Whenever you have to buy a product or buy a service, this is a problem that a lot of industry will have. But if you look at how other companies dealing with it, so for example, the big multinationals, they have a very strict policy on ethics. So a lot of them, when you do business with them, they send you a code of conduct and make you to sign it. If you don't sign it, you don't business with them. If you breach the code of conduct, you will become blacklisted. But also from your own side, you have to take measures. So it's eventually, in the end, it's all about the integrity of your own people. So how do you deal with that? So what you can do is, for example, if you look at logistics procurement, a lot of companies, they centralize the procurement. So all the indirect and direct procurement to a procurement function. Have strict controls in place, make sure that not one person make a decision, but there are always layers and different people making the decision. The procurement department is also having activities such as having to do benchmarks. The tendering process should be in place. So it's more a procurement question, but you can make it more difficult, but to eliminate it entirely, I don't think it's like you cannot guarantee it. So you can only minimize it by making it more difficult.
I think we have time for one more question. Is that okay?
Okay.
Let's take the question from ABB in Hanoi. I heard about milk run for more than 5 years in Vietnam now. Do you have any research on this kind of transportation? Does it work out in Vietnam, and is it the same with cross-docking?
Okay, so milk run is not the same as cross-docking. So milk run is the concept in logistics that you have fixed routes. So the term comes from in more mature economies where the farmers they supply milk, and then when they supply milk, it's always a fixed route which they call a milk run, and every route has a certain drop-off point, so a predefined drop-off points. So yeah, in Vietnam, some companies use the milk run, but what you see more often is in Vietnam is it's still very point-to-point delivery. So if you go from A to B, that's one shipment. It's because they want to. They think that they can they would like to utilize the truck as fully as possible. But if you do milk run, you have to have more systems in place because it requires more organization and more structure. So yeah, some companies they use milk run, but it requires that you need to have a very solid practice in place to run the transport management.
So I think that's all the time we have today for our webinar. We have some more questions that came in, and we will address those questions offline. On behalf of Phuc and Rohit, let me remind you that KPMG Vietnam has a track record of navigating these interesting areas of business such as logistics and supply chain, strategy and operations. Please contact us if you would like advice on market entry or the expansion of your business in Vietnam. On the screen now is a brief survey. We would appreciate if you could take some time out and tell us what you thought of our webinar today. Tomorrow morning, I will send out a follow-up email that will include a link to the recording, the YouTube recording, our informative slide deck, some of the links to the video clips that they showed today during their presentation, and information on how to contact us further. On behalf of our esteemed speakers, Phuc and Rohit, as well as the team at KPMG Vietnam, thank you for joining us and have a great rest of your day.